Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Ah, great. Can you turn on your webcam? I guess I can turn on mine as well.
Okay, hold
If you
on.
want to see me, I don't know. Are you gonna record this on your end? I assume you are. Or
Um, I'm. Can you just send me a copy?
yeah, no worries. Yeah, I'm live streaming it right now, so I mean you can just like grab it from my
Oh, okay.
stream.
Hi.
Yeah, you're live by the way, so don't say anything
Oh, I was
anything
just
bad.
about to. Yeah.
All right, let me see if I can get you on the stream as well. How do we do this?
What are you using? OBS?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the best way to get you on. Maybe I can just like full screen like this, maybe? Is this fine, chat? I think this is fine. You can see him,
Wait,
right?
what's the name of your channel? I'm gonna see. I want to see the live chat.
Yeah, you can see on twitch.tv/ Dario
Oh, it's
Rahim,
not.
just like my name.
Oh, you're on Twitch. I don't have Twitch on my phone.
Oh, yeah, no
Oh.
worries. So yeah, I guess just to contextualize a bit about like why I sort of reached out to you. I listened to your talk with Vosh and with Destiny as well, and I think we agree on like most things in terms of like the your statements on like religion and like Muslim culture and sort of how I guess religion is bad for people in terms of like making like logical connections and sort of teaching people how to sort of think about things in a way that's more positive. Um,
Right.
what I specifically thought was interesting was if you're, I guess, you said that you don't really think that like cultural Muslims exist or something around that line, or you don't think that like it's
Oh,
very prevalent. I guess I wanted
oh,
to.
yeah, it's not very. I didn't say they don't exist. They obviously do exist, but relatively, they're very small compared to cultural Christians and
Oh,
cultural
okay,
Jews. Cultural
sure.
Jews, for example, are very common. Jews that don't believe in any of the stories, and many of them don't even believe in God, but yet they're culturally Jewish. Cultural Christians, I mean, cultural Christian is also very normal if you consider people who celebrate Christmas and Easter also culturally Christian. Then that includes a whole bunch of atheists that are culturally Christian, right?
Hmm.
But cultural Muslim, I'm not against it. I'm against reform Muslim,
Yeah,
like
sure.
but cultural Muslim, I'm actually very for that. Um, Most people who have left Islam, I don't want anything to do with it ever again. They
Sure.
have completely washed their hands off of it. Like, no, no, thank you. I mean, I know
You
people
were you
who,
were a Muslim before, right? I remember
yes,
you
yes.
saying, yeah, yeah. Do you like partake in like any of the traditions or stuff?
So my love and hate relationship with Islam is not, so I hate Islam as a guide to life, right? As a source of morality and all of that. That I think it's one of the worst set of ideas for anybody to use. But when it comes to the parts that I like, it's the mythology and the history and maybe some of the arts, the calligraphy, the architecture, the mosques. That part I enjoy. I'm not, I'm not into traditions in general. Um, so, you know,
I
and
personally I like the food. I think the the food.
oh yeah, the food. Well, I mean, I thought I liked Muslim food until I went to Israel, and then the Jewish people gave me the same food, and they said this is our food, and I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, so this is Middle Eastern food. This is not Muslim
yeah,
food,
yeah, yeah. No, yeah,
right?
that's right. I guess I'm
Right.
mostly talking about like my experiences with like I guess my personal experiences with like Muslim culture. I was born into like a Muslim family. My
Mm,
parents are relatively traditional. I guess they don't do like the prayers or whatever, but they don't eat like pig meat, like bacon and stuff. They don't like they believe in like God and stuff and like whatever. Um,
right.
but they didn't like they didn't try and like push the religion onto me, more like the traditions, right? So I was never like a believer in like the supernatural aspects or whatever, but I did like celebrate Ramadan and like fucking the fuck
Well, you
we'll call it.
Ramadan, celebrating Ramadan is not the fasting part that people are celebrating. It's the eating part that people are celebrating.
Yeah,
The
true.
breaking of the fast. Yeah.
And we celebrated Bayram. It was called here. I don't know if there's like different names for it. Do you know what I mean when I say Bayram?
No.
Fuck.
So here's the thing.
Oh, it's Eid. The Eid.
Eid. Oh yeah. Which one? There's a whole bunch of them.
It's the it's the end. I think the end of Eid. Is Bayram.
Yeah. So here's what I would tell you. I think the interesting thing is that a lot of people use cultural Muslims and reformed Muslims interchangeably.
Sure.
And they cannot be any more opposite. And I support one of them, and I'm fundamentally against the other one. And they actually they're polar opposites of each other, right? Cultural Muslim, if we want to use the same terminology that we use when we say cultural Christian or cultural Jew, if we want to use the same for what we mean by cultural Muslim, then cultural Muslim is a person who doesn't believe but still wants to enjoy, partake in some of the traditions, some of the art, some of the fashion, some of the food, some of the community gathering and stuff like that. So it's like the tradition without the belief. Okay. The Reform Muslim is in some way the exact opposite. Reform Muslim is like, well, there are some of the traditions that I see as problematic and I don't want to continue, but I want to keep the belief. I want to believe in Allah. I want to believe in Muhammad. I want to believe that the Quran is the direct word of God. I want to keep the belief. I don't want to keep there are some parts I want to maybe excuse and say, well, maybe this is not what Islam really is. But the core belief, I don't want to get rid of that.
Oh, sure. No, I have an interesting question about that because I didn't feel like you got too deep into that with sort of like Destiny. It's just like, what are your like general beliefs about concepts like freedom of religion or like generally of religion, right? So like religion takes on many forms, right? Some people will often distinguish between organized religion and just like being religious or like spiritual in some sort of way. Are you against all of that, or are you mostly against like organized religions?
No, I'm against all falsehoods, not just religion. All falsehood, all false information, harmful, harmless, anything that is not based on reality, I'm against it. But that is not.
So wait, so are you against like fantasy, like elves and orcs and like enjoying?
No, because you don't actually believe it's real.
Mm.
I would be like if I like Harry Potter, I enjoyed Harry Potter. I read it as a kid. I really enjoyed it. Okay, that's not a problem. If you actually believe that's real, that represents something that's an issue. Okay, that's a major difference. Okay, imagine if you lived in a world where all of a sudden kids all believe that Harry Potter is real and they want to figure out how to do witchcraft and they went in the woods, started looking for Hogwarts. That would be like a weird and problematic word for us to believe. Like if people couldn't understand how to detect what's real and what's not real, that's an issue, right?
Sure.
So you can enjoy.
But what would you?
That's why.
What would you do about it?
Okay, so let me actually also say something. This is why I like Islam as fantasy. I like Islam as mythology, right? I think there's some fascinating stories that I tell Muslims, like, you have no idea how much more fun Islam is once you stop believing in it, right? You can enjoy fantasies. I'm not against that. But again, you put two things right next to each other. You're like, what do you think about religion and what do you think about freedom of religion? Those are like, I could be for freedom of religion while being against religion. At the same time, those two positions can be held at the same time.
I agree. I'm just asking like where you stand. Because some people will go as far as say they will try and forbid like any like form of like religious thought. Like people will burn like religious books and stuff like.
okay, so I'm not against burning religious books just to fight any form of like free, just in the same way that I support religious people expressing their ideas and fight for their rights and nobody being able to stop them from expressing themselves in any way they want, as long as they're not harming any individual. I think burning their sacred books is also an expression of an idea that should not be prohibited.
Sure.
In fact, I burned the Quran and put it on YouTube, right?
Sure. But okay, so just to continue that thought, so would you that, because it seems like you're very, and I agree with this, you're very concerned with like the real life consequences of like religion and like believing like bad things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't disagree with that. I like my question, because I value like individual freedoms very highly. Like I'm like a libertarian in some sense, or in many senses. Yeah. So like So like, depending on how you frame that, or like your specific like beliefs on how to deal with people who are religious, right? I don't necessarily think, like, if religion doesn't have bad real life consequences, and like you just believe that there's a god or whatever, it just like makes you feel safe or whatever, but it doesn't like come to fruition through like bad actions in your real life in any kind of way, I don't necessarily think that's like bad.
Well, it is bad because you don't. My okay. This is here's the claim, and I don't think it's an extraordinary claim to make. I think the more our beliefs are based on falsehoods, the more our understanding of how the work works and what we are and what is close to reality and what claims are so far away from reality. I think the more real things we believe and the less false things we believe, we will be able to operate better as a society and progress faster. Okay. You don't wait for ideas to be harmful to fight them if they're false. You fight for the truth because it's the truth. Believing in true things is better than believing in false things.
Sure. I mean,
I always say,
continue.
like, if you allow believing in harmless nonsense without evidence, you're also opening the door to harmful nonsense without evidence, because the gate that you just opened was critical thinking skills. Once you open that door, once you don't have that filter, there is no other gate that comes after. Where are you going to introduce that gate filter next? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you, like, for example, palm reading, right? That's nonsense, right? You don't believe like you could tell the future by reading someone's palm, right? But I don't think nobody's being killed for palm reading. Not that I know of. There's no wars being waged in the name of palm reading right now, at least. So people are like, okay, well, they believe in palm reading. That seems like harmless. Who cares? Let them believe what they want, right? But a person that believes in palm reading is gullible enough to believe in all other bunch of nonsense, right? You have this a person that does not know how to look for evidence, believes things randomly, is gullible. For this person can be taken advantage of, can be made to believe in other harmful things. A person who believes palm, like you could tell your future by looking at the palm of your hand, is also a person who might likely believe that vaccines cause autism, right? And believing that vaccines cause autism could end up being harmful to you or your children. So if I know that you believe palm reading is actually a legit way to know your future, I'm going to use it. I'm going to, if by the way, if you allow me, like if you show me the green light, I'm never going to force my ideas or content on you. But if I see that you've shown me the green light and you're open for me to challenge you on that, I'm going to use it as an opportunity to tell you why that's horseshit. Why, like, how did you come to that conclusion? Like, people like me, you're going to tell me like, oh, that's a waste of time. I mean, this is not a harmful idea. I mean, but if I give this person the tool to realize why that's a bullshit idea, you're also equipping them. You're also giving them the tools for them to recognize what other ideas might be bullshit that might be harmful in the future. And you never know what ideas are going to end up being harmful. What I say is, like, your beliefs are like a map, right? And if the objective real world is like a field, like you have trees and you have mountains and you have a river, and you're looking for your treasure. And everybody has their own treasure. Like they're going through their life and they're trying to achieve their goals. And you have a map. And let's say you have a map, I have a map. My map is completely like random. Like the mountain is in the wrong place, the river is in the wrong place. Everything is just random, like all over the map. Your map is more accurate. It's not completely accurate because none of us could know always 100% certain what's real. But it reflects your map reflects reality much more closely than my map. More like if you go through life looking for your treasure with your map, you're more likely to find your treasure than I am. Sometimes I might get like I can't just get treasure, but you have the tools. You are well more equipped. So I'm just like that's why I'm saying, like, if our belief systems are matched reality closer, it doesn't only help us individually. It's a healthier society to live in as well.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. Do you know the difference between a descriptive and a prescriptive statement?
Yeah, but can you remind me?
Yeah. So I think me and you, I think we agree on like the descriptive statements. So talking about like what is like how is religion a problem,
Right.
like all these things. So what I want to know is like what are your prescriptive statements? What do you want to do about it? How do we achieve like the goals, right?
So there is and ought to.
Yeah. So like how do you, I guess, would you be for like legislation, like legislating against like certain types of like religion or
no way. Okay, so any any solution that involves taking people's individual freedom away is replacing one problem with a bigger problem.
Okay.
In my opinion, right? Like so no, I'm definitely not for that. I'm for having more conversation, normalizing dissent, normalizing having difficult conversations, encouraging people to reevaluate their ideas. It's very interesting because a lot of people tell us, like, Armin, why can't you just let people believe what they want? And I tell them that's exactly what we're doing. You're like, if imagine if somebody is born as a Muslim and they are not exposed to any other ideas other than Islam when it comes to their ideology, then technically they are not they're not choosing. They are not exposed to any other ideas other than Islam, so they haven't made a choice. The only way that you could let them believe what they want is by exposing them to multiple options for them to choose one, right?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
by exposing them to ideas other than Islam, we are the ones who are letting them believe what they want.
Yeah.
The people who are advocating, oh no, like let's not expose them to anything else other than Islam. I have to tell them, why can't you let them believe what they want, right? And
Sure.
again, this not like when I have a lot of anti-Muslim bigots that get excited sometimes, about our anti-Islam content until they realize what we actually stand for, because a lot of people think like anti-Islam content and activism might suggest that we are against Muslims as people in any way. But then when they start following us, they realize that actually it's the exact opposite. The best way to convince people out of their ideas is to befriend them, right? Like I say, like the best way to fight Islam is to befriend Muslims. So it does not require any like hostility towards people who believe in a certain idea. It's only going to get their guard up. It's also going to make them more radical, and it's also going to make them more tribal, because now you're an out group attacking them, and
Ask
they have
him to
to
prove that
rely on their
Muhammad actually
tribe
existed.
for protection against you. So it's going to make them close, get their guards up, close their minds. Obviously, that's not going to work. I mean, to be fair, like even if strategically it doesn't make sense, it's just not nice. You don't want to be a dick to people, right? But there's two. By the way, like there's two different forms of activism. One of them, the tone of it is a lot more hostile than the other one, but they have different. Like we do both of them, and they have different purposes, right? Like, for example, when we go out talk about against Islam, and we're just putting our content out there in public, when you consume that content, it seems like very aggressive, very like no holding, no holding any punches, very, very aggressive, very, very like unapologetic anti-Islam, rhetoric. But the main goal, but then if you look at the way if we have discussions with Muslim about their ideas, and we talk to them for why they might be wrong, it seems a lot more kind and gentle and friendly and sympathetic. And some people feel like, why is there two so extreme? Like, why is your tone so different in these two methods of activism? But the reason is their purpose is different. One of them is fighting for freedom and freedom of expression, right? One of them is about, oh, here are the red lines you're introducing to us about the things that we're not allowed to say, and we look at your red line and we spit on your red line and we cross it. Like, fuck you, you don't get to tell us what to say, right?
I'm
That's
curious.
what.
Yeah. So
Right.
just to bring it to an area that's maybe more interesting. Do you
Mm.
think that there is a degree of religion that is so bad that you would advocate for like going against like people's individual freedoms? Like, for example, let's say there's like I'm not trying to like name any societies or whatever, but let's say there exists like an oppressive society with a dictator that determines, okay, everybody here has to undergo these religious rules which are very strict, and like whatever, like the worst parts of Islam or whatever, like whatever religion you think is the worst. Do you think there is an argument for like going in and like getting those people out of that because they cannot freely choose to leave it, or would you still only like seek to inform?
Well, any form of restricting people's freedom of mobility or anything like that has to be, the standards for those people has to be the same standards that you apply to people outside of that religion. You know what I mean? Like,
No,
I
can you
don't think,
elaborate?
like, okay, so for example, are you talking, let's say we have a religious cult that is holding children in without their permission, without their, against their will, and indoctrinating them, I don't know, like maybe molesting them or something like that, and then you send in the cops to free the children. I would have sent the cops even if they were not religious, right?
Sure.
Like, even if they were like even if it was a group of people that were doing this based on no ideology, they're just like, oh, let's just have this group and brainwash people so we could have sex with them or something like that. I don't think, I think the standards should not be, the standards should be equal to people on what the role of the government or um,
Sure.
force should be, no matter what,
I guess the
it's
question the
yeah.
question there is like some could argue, I'm not sure if I'm ready to make that argument, but like you could argue that religion in itself creates a system that sort of brainwashes and perpetuates itself like through the people, right? So like something as simple as just like letting
Right.
children grow up in a religious house is already
Mhm.
like indoctrinating them into the religion in their most like vulnerable years, like the years where
Right.
they sort of start thinking about the world, right? So I mean, could you make an argument that it is like immoral to not like save those children, for example, from?
Right, but if I make an argument for against, like, what's the role of the laws and government for stopping, parents from scaring their kids about eternal hellfire or something like that, it needs to be a law that would require, that will also stop anybody from doing that in a non-religious way. You
Yeah,
know what I
I
mean?
agree. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so
Well, I guess the
but
only
yeah,
difference would
but
be in like severity, right? So you could argue that
right,
in some ways
but
religion is worse than like, I don't know, believing in ghosts
yeah,
or whatever.
but yeah, but the thing is that when it comes to government involvement, the government, I think it should be left up to us activists to fight ideas themselves. The government should just be responsible for what's the immediate harm, or what's the harm, right? And what laws do I need to pass to protect my citizens from the harm itself? The government should not get involved in, oh, what ideas, what are the good, like, as a libertarian, I also, I think like the marketplace of ideas, just like the marketplace of, goods and services, should not be up to the government for it to like manipulate. You know what I mean?
Okay.
The
Interesting.
government should be like, okay, you guys are harming my citizens, cut it out. Right? You can't do that to my citizens, right? But when it comes to which ideas are good ideas and which ideas are bad ideas, the government should just provide an environment where those ideas could challenge each other's and let the best ones win. That's what I
I
mean.
guess the question would be if like some ideas are so egregious that they should be like discouraged from like a centralized system.
It does well, yeah. I mean, if it comes to taking power or stuff like that's different. But when it comes to just people being able to express them, it doesn't work for the government to be like, you cannot even express these ideas. This is one thing I like about the United States. If you have like a Nazi protest out there, and the mob wants to attack the Nazis, the police will be sent out to protect the goddamn Nazis against the mob, right? And you can still compare that to a country like Germany, where there are restrictions for what people can say. Like, you can't do the Nazi salute, you can't deny the Holocaust, and we haven't seen that really that working in Germany. I mean, we have um, a lot of these Nazi parties are now have a role in government, even after introductions of these laws. I just think like first when you want to outlaw certain ideas, there's certain things that you're doing that is dangerous about that. First of all, I don't think you're helping the ideas die. What you're gonna do is you're gonna drive them underground. They're gonna go in the dark, and they're gonna start growing in out of our sight, and they're gonna become a bigger problem than we recognize because we don't even see it as a problem. Another thing you're gonna do is you're gonna give these people the victimhood card, and they're gonna play that victimhood card. Like, well, what are these people afraid of? The only reason why they can't, they're outlawing our ideas is because they don't have the logic. I mean, a lot of people also assume that there must be something that they real about what they're saying, or else people wouldn't be outlawing them, or else people would just be arguing against them.
Sure.
And the third most dangerous thing is that you're giving the government the authority to decide which ideas are too dangerous to express. And once you give that government that authority, you don't really know how that government is going to use that authority, right? Like, maybe now they managed to go, I just, the government shouldn't have that power, because you can't trust the government to use that power responsibly at all times, right? There are going to be many ideas that should be like, if you like, oh yeah, please shut these people up, government, please, tomorrow they're going to come after you. Tomorrow you just give them the tools to come after your ideas, in a decade or
Sure.
so.
I think
Yeah.
I think sort of the discussion of like freedom and like what, for example, freedom of speech actually entails is really interesting. So like one could argue, and like I would make this argument like as well, is that it isn't necessarily about only the negative freedom, sort of like what you cannot do, right, or what you cannot stop people from doing. It is instead what people should be concerned about is effective freedom, like how like
Yeah.
in effect, like how much freedom do you actually have on like with the laws in place. So for example, right now, even in the US, there are
Mm.
restrictions of freedom of speech, right? You can't do calls to violence on like a
Mm.
in like on your platform, right? Like if you're like a, let's say you have like millions of followers, or whatever, you can't just like type out names, oh go attack this and this person or whatever, you'll be stopped, right?
But that isn't that because is that in that situation, it's not the expression of an idea that is a problem. The reason why that's outlawed is that it's being covered under a different
Yeah.
law. Like, for example, if I say like, oh, buy this bottle, um it cures cancer, right? And it's just a bottle of water, and I start selling it. If I get arrested for that, I can't just be like, "Oh, what happened to my freedom of expression?" I should be able to. I should be able to freely say that this, even if this doesn't cure cancer, my freedom of expression means that I should be able to tell people that this has cured cancer. Like, no, this is there's a different law. Like, you can't have, this is a scam. You're conning people. This is covered by a different. This is not the reason why this is outlawed. Is not that you shouldn't be able to say what you're saying. What you want to say. The reason why this is outlawed is because you're running a scam, right?
Well,
So
sure, but
I mean,
it's effectively like suppressing what you can and cannot say, right? So there are restrictions of like what you can or cannot say, but those are like common sense. I guess you would say restrictions based on like people's well-being, right? You don't have the right to like scam people, or you don't have the right to like yell fire in a crowded area or whatever to make people panic. Even though those are like restrictions, we put those restrictions there because we recognize that there would be more issues if they weren't there.
yeah, but I don't see that as a restriction of freedom of expression, right? I just I see that as the reason why those things are restrictions are they're violating laws, that it's not just about expressing ideas, right? I mean,
Sure,
if
but
I
couldn't you
yeah.
then say, because a good example that I guess to bring up is Germany, right? So in Germany they have like anti-Nazi laws, right? Like you
Mhm.
cannot like I don't remember the
You
exact
can't
law.
deny the Holocaust.
Yeah, stuff like that, right? So you would say, well, their freedom to like deny the Holocaust or like talk about Nazi stuff or whatever is restricted, right? But they're restricted by other laws. So would you then say
No, but
that they have
no,
freedom of
because that law
speech?
is just simply the whole purpose of that law is the restriction of restriction on expressing an idea. Like, it's not a scam. It's not like it's not already covered under, you cannot cause people like violent harm. Like, this is the entirety of that law is like, you cannot express a certain idea. That's the whole purpose of that law. That's what I'm against. This is a restriction of an idea simply for restricting an idea. Like, that is the entirety of it, right? It's completely different from like me like calling somebody like, "Hey, go kill this person. I'll pay you $5,000 if you kill this person," and then I get arrested for that. The law that made me get arrested for that was a law that exists independently from restrictions of expressing of ideas. Like, that's a law about like, you cannot hire people to murder. Like, but I cannot come like, well, I was just expressing my idea on the phone, like this was just speech. Like, no, this is like, I mean, I don't know, do you see the difference? One of them is about just
Sure.
restricting ideas, the other one is about
Sure,
restricting
I think I sort of get
murder.
where you're. I think I think I get where you're coming from. I guess I would ask you some clarifying questions. So, for example, so it seems like you're more interested in like restricting like certain actions, so to say, rather than restricting ideas, or like you want people to be able to express ideas, but not like scam people or whatever.
Well,
So
here's the line. If some, I think here's my line. I think if somebody comes and says, "Oh, Armin left Islam," people who leave Islam should die. I think that should be
in a
allowed.
video game. I'm sorry.
in a, yeah, in Minecraft. I think that should be allowed. If somebody says like, "Oh, Armin," it would be amazing. It would be great if somebody killed Armin. I think that should also be allowed. I think the line for me is like, "Hey, go
Really?
kill Armin." Yeah, I think the
Okay.
line for me would
Hmm.
be, "Go kill Armin." Somebody, please go kill Armin. I think that's the line that they just crossed.
Hmm.
But before that,
Interesting.
if somebody says like, "Hey, if somebody killed Armin, that would be a great thing. I would be celebrating that." I think that should be allowed. That's free speech.
Okay, interesting. Well, okay, but do you recognize that like it is very like it is provably true that like when people say like those things or whatever, like that those things like happen, right? Like when like that
Yeah,
when like when people allude to like things should, like for example, there was like this famous example, fuck, the one who shut up, who started shooting in like a synagogue or whatever in the U.S., where he did like a manifesto where he talked about like the people that inspired him or whatever. It wasn't like people telling go shoot up like synagogues or whatever. It was just like people saying like, oh, the Jews are causing issues, whatever, and like Jewishness is like destroying culture or whatever. Yeah.
So the thing is though that there's no set of policies and standards that you come up with that's not going to have harm, right? It's about it's all about trade-offs, right? There's like, again, I don't know, I remember somebody mentioning there's no solutions, there's only trade-offs, right? Wherever you're going to put the line, as I could show you, like, oh, you put the line here, well, here are the consequences of putting the line here. Well, oh, you put the line over here, oh, here's the consequences of putting the line here. You're always going to find really, really horrible things as a result of where you draw the line, no matter where you put it. The question is like, okay, where could I put this line that has the least amount of harm, not the no harm, right? And it's really hard to talk about this, especially when some of the harm is people dying, and then you express, well, this is the harm that we're going to accept. Are you going to say, well, really, you're trading human lives now? You're tolerating people dying?
No, we always trade human lives.
Yeah, we're always trading human lives. Well, so I mean, even if you go a lot more strict than what many people want, I can still show you that people are going to die, because you need to go even more strict, or else people are going to die. But what are you giving up? Again, this has been the historic trade-off, has been security, giving up freedom for security, right?
Sure.
And it's the reason is the people who want to give up, the people who argue giving up freedom for security, it's easier for them to appeal to people's emotions, is because it's easier to show lives lost for lack of security, right? Like, you could just actually show that, like, oh, look at these people that you just killed because of your ideas, right? It's just really easy to show that to people. But the people that are on the side of like, oh, we need more freedom, and we might need to forego a little bit of security for freedom, the lives lost to lack of freedom are more indirect. Like, a society that has less freedom progressing slower, and that the progress being slower, the way that affects people's lives, the way that the way that lives are lost because of that, the argument for that is not so direct, and that's why it's hard to appeal to people's emotion about what they're giving up. There needs to be a better way for us to show people how much they're giving up if they do not fight for their freedoms.
Yeah, so like this is an interesting concept, right? So this is the concept of where do you draw the line on like freedom, right? Because I can make the argument that let's say, for example, well, we don't even have to use like a hypothetical example. I say just in general, by the nature of how freedom of speech works, I think some people's freedom to speak inherently limits other people's freedoms to speak because of fear of like reprisal, because of fear of like suppression, right? So, for example, if you allow a lot of I guess a lot of transphobic people to speak, right? I don't know how you feel about trans rights or whatever, but like if you allow a lot of transphobic people,
I support trans rights.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. Yeah. So like if you allow a lot of like transphobic people to speak and like shit on them, and like they're like very big because trans people are like a very small minority, then trans people will be afraid to be like dogpiled, right? They'll be afraid to like be targeted for like harassment, and they will speak out less because of that fear, like because of somebody else's speech.
I think it's the other way around. First of all, I'm all for safe spaces for people to, like, if you have environments where people feel not attacked, and you have rules for that community where certain people are not allowed, that's not against your freedom of speech. Freedom of speech doesn't mean you have the right to every goddamn platform out there, right? So I'm not against that, but when it comes to the public arena and the government getting involved, I think not letting transphobic people to express themselves is actually going to put more trans people in danger, because it's going to be hard for us to see the red flags, and then to see transphobia, how big of an issue transphobia is, and how that we need to deal with it, and for us to identify who the transphobic people are, and especially the ones that are a threat to trans people. We want these people to identify themselves, and we want these ideas to be out there for us to be able to challenge. I mean, I think a lot of people, um I mean, I consider myself an anti-SJW person, but I recognize that a lot of anti-SJW people do not recognize how big of a problem the alt-right is. I think like a lot of people, a lot of them think like it's a minor issue, and the reason why they think it's a minor issue is because they're right now they have been driven to the darkest corners of the internet, and unless you hang in there, you don't realize how, like, most people that in my community do not realize how big anti-Semitic views are, how common outright explicit bigotry still is. And the reason why people don't recognize that as how is because they're just like shunned into places where people don't see them. And I think, like, that's it's just that they're not going to go away. They're not going to just be like, oh, you're not going to be able to post on Facebook and Twitter. You think that's going to make these ideas disappear? No, these people will find each other, and unless you talk to them, unless you try to reach out to them, you're not fixing this problem. So I think for the sake of trans people, you would want these people to you want to see this you want these people to express themselves so that you could engage with them. Engaging with these people actually works. It's amazing to me that when I actually go inside these bubbles of these where these people hang out, because there's nobody else there anymore other than the ones that they agree with, it's so easy actually to convince them out of their ideas, um because like so a high percentage of them will see that they're wrong if you just give us a little bit of an opportunity to talk to them. You have you have driven them into echo chambers, um and you have removed our access to them. So I mean, that is dangerous. That is dangerous to trans people, I think.
Sure. I mean, I can sort of I can see that perspective and sort of sympathize with it. Would you recognize that like deplatforming, if like taken to like a relatively like extreme level, like does work in terms of like limiting like those people's reach? So like, for example, famous examples are Milo fuck
Yeah,
Yiannopoulos.
Uniopolis. Yeah.
Yeah. Milo and like Alex Jones as well. Like, because their deplatforming was so severe, like they were banned from like every single platform. They now make way less money and are able to reach like less people.
Right. So what I think happens is that those people do get hurt and they do lose their audience, but the ideas themselves do not get that much.
Hmm.
It's you're mostly hurting those individuals. You're not really hurting the idea that much. In fact, a
But
lot of
but
people
but less
you
people.
might.
Sure. Less people propagating an idea, I think inherently like will make like less people follow it, right? So like, if we completely banned sort of anyone talking about Nazis or whatever, like less people would be exposed to like Nazi ideas. Like that they would still I agree that they would still have their communities and like fester and like get really like dangerous or whatever, but there would be less people overall because like the common person wouldn't be exposed to like that.
Yeah, but their message works better if you do. So the thing is that the more you try to hide these people, the more people are going to be curious about what the hell you're trying to ban here. What are you trying to what is this so bad about these things that you don't want me to see, right? And more people, and the problem is a lot of the things that are getting banned and people don't want to talk about, there's some truth to them and then followed by a whole bunch of bullshit, right? That is not true. And that layer of truth that they use to spread their ideas are those like uncomfortable truths that also are getting banned from these platforms. And then once, certain things that is true, but it seems like it's an outright narrative. And then when you ban even these ideas, those layers of truth could be used as a way to tell people like, look, this is the truth that they're hiding from you. And then once it's very effective, because when the people realize that, okay, this part of what they're saying is true, and they're not letting me exposed to this, and I can look this up and it's actually true. And like, what else are they hiding from me? You're actually driving people, and then you're scaring and also when you ban these ideas from these platforms, then you're creating an echo chamber, but you're also driving people to like, well, I can't say these things here. I need to go find these places where people are allowed to say these things. So first you created an echo chamber, and then you're also intimidating people that like, look, you're going to be kicked out. You're going to be go into the naughty zone if you say these things. So people are going to be like, well, where are you? I'll go myself. Where is this? What are they saying? And then in those places, okay, so you might have like as a percentage less people exposed to it, but that smaller percentage of people that are exposed to it are not hearing, in those echo chambers, are not hearing people telling you why they're wrong. I just think that that's a much more effective brainwashing tool. Right?
Sure. I mean,
amazing.
I agree. I agree that. I guess I agree in this sense. I agree in like your descriptive claim of the how it can be more enticing when things are forbidden. 100% agree. And also the fact that like if something is like inherently seen as like a forbidden or like bad thing, and you figure it out and you like see one thing and then sort of things crumble or whatever, and then you start believing something else and something else, you sort of walk down the steps of like the dangerous ideology. Completely agree with that. However, what I do, if we're looking at a sort of strictly from like a utilitarian, like pragmatic perspective, let's say that there is, let's say, Nazism, right? Let's say, so what we can do is we can say, okay, either 100 million people get exposed to like base level Nazi ideology, or 10,000 people get exposed to it, right? And then maybe even if you increase the conversion rate, you say, okay, well, of those 10,000 people, 30% are converted into Nazis. That might still be overall less people than if like the 100 million people, if they had like a 5% or whatever, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like from like a, do you think there is any credence to that, or like?
I haven't. I mean, I don't think that's how it works, because I mean, you could show me where something like this has worked. I think overall, if government getting involved in limiting certain ideas, I mean, here's the thing: I'm a utilitarian as well. If you can show me that what you're saying is true, and I would be like, well, as a utilitarian, I would back that policy then, because to me, it's not about it's not about principles. To me, it's about consequences.
Okay.
I just think the best way to fight harmful ideas is to expose them and tell people why they're wrong.
Yeah, so the reason why I asked you that hypothetical is actually just to ask you a bigger question about like how you value freedom, right? So there's like two ways that you can sort of go about freedom. You can say, I value freedom as a means of achieving like a better society. Like I want to use freedom as a tool to get like better outcomes, or you can say I value freedom as an end. Like I think freedom in itself is valuable, like inherently, right? There's like two different ways. Do you understand?
Yeah. No. The truth matters because the freedom matters because free people, free societies are happier societies and they progress faster. The truth matters. No, I don't fight for the truth because the truth matters because I have this like, oh, I want, the truth is useful, right? Everything is about happiness. Everything is about making societies healthier, saving people from misery, making the highest number of people happy. That's the only goal.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So so let me ask you then a question, right? Because from I'm a libertarian because I believe that freedom in itself is a value that should be strived for, because I don't think that no matter how good outcomes we can imagine, I don't think we can ever create as good outcomes for people as people can for themselves. Does that make sense?
Okay, but that you just contradicted yourself, because by good you started saying something that seemed like you fight for freedom as a principle, but then your defense of that was you mentioned the consequences of freedom, right? Your argument for that was because if you give people the freedom, they will get better. They will be able to come up with better outcome for themselves rather than anyone else. That's why you defend freedom. So isn't that a contradiction? Like you just
I understand.
You just defended it with the utility of freedom.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So the other part of that, so I guess the second argument there would be that I also value people's decisions to choose worse outcomes for themselves, right? Or what I would consider to be worse outcomes.
Why?
Because I value the ability to choose bad outcomes, because I think that choosing bad outcomes can lead to better outcomes in the future.
There you go. That's consequence again. But so it's not because
it's on a different
either.
Sure, yeah. I guess we're talking about the difference between like meta ethics versus what's it called? Like it's like two different levels of ethics, I think. So
then it comes to consequences. No matter what you do, any principle that you defend, if I ask you why you defend that principle, whatever answer you have to that, it ends up being okay. So it's not a principle you're defending; it's the consequences that you're worried.
Sure, but well, I mean, I think from that framing, you sort of remove the importance of like consequences, right? Because you have to somehow decide what are those consequences. So, for example, you could say to somebody who isn't a consequence, someone who is like a deontologist, you could just say, well, why did you value those deons? I think they're called, like those duties. Why do you value those duties? And they would say, well, because they think it's going to create a better society. But then you say, but actually that is consequential. But it isn't, right? Yeah. Those are two different
no, but
like
that's my point.
Views.
Everybody, I think my point is that everybody is, at the end of the day, a consequential.
Okay.
Even that's my point.
Sure.
Right?
Okay. I guess I think philosophers would take issue with that, but that's fine.
Well, yeah, But I mean, I guess the only principle that it comes down to, that you can't answer why after that, is that we want people to be happy, and we want less misery for people, and we want more happiness for more people. That's where everything leads to that principle. That's the one that you can't answer why. Why? Because
well, sure, but there's like different ways to structure society, right? So like building on like a consequentialist framework, you can say you can be like a rule utilitarian or like an act utilitarian, and like those are different ways to sort of structure how to improve or
I mean, we disagree on how we achieve that goal, obviously, but at the end of the day, it comes to that one goal. I mean, even when you argue with religious people, it's all when you argue with anything about anything, it always comes down to that. Like, is Islam true or not? Well, why are we talking about this? Well, we're trying to figure out, like, if there's an afterlife. Obviously the solution to making the highest number of people happy is going to be completely different than if there wasn't, right? All of these arguments comes down to that, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm starting to see like how you sort of structure your ethics. What's your like how do you think we decide what is true and false? Like, do you think there's like objective
Right.
truth?
There is objective truth. We will never be able to know if we have achieved, if we know what the objective truth is, but we can always tell if we are closer to it or farther away from it by how powerful our predictive, how accurate our predictive methods are, how the models that we create about how everything works. If it has a higher predictive power, by logically must mean that our models are closer to reality than the models that don't. Right? So, just being able to see that, and also the number of times that our models contradict each other. If the models that we create to explain the universe and everything around us, the if they're consistent, if they're not self-contradictory, that's also an indication that we're coming up with better models, right? And that's what the scientific method is supposed to do, right? The scientific method is supposed to explain things as best as it can in a way that's why one of the good attributes of of the scientific method is the fact that it's repeatable. The fact that it's repeatable shows that it has predictive powers, right? We come up with the scientific method also tries to come up adjust for our personal biases, including the scientist biases, as much as we can. All the flaws that we have in our logic, in our observation, in our pattern recognition, trying to adjust for all of that is what we call the scientific method.
Sure.
Right?
I'm super like again I agree with what you're saying. I think sort of the scientific method currently is sort of the best way to sort of assess the truth claims of like certain statements.
Right.
I'm interested to hear. Would you then say that, for example, like let's say hundreds, if like thousands years ago or whatever, that religion had value then because religion could like by their standards better explain like some natural things that like I don't know whatever else system they had like before science existed, right?
Well, there was never that. I mean, like when?
Sure. So for example, saying why does it rain? Well, it rains because God is like pissing on whatever the sky or like whatever fantasy you want to say, right? Well, at that time that made sense, right? Because they had no alternative to that. They like there was only like fantasy, right? They had no.
Well, the explanation didn't make sense. The fact that they came up with that explanation makes sense, but the explanation itself doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I would agree, but they would have no way to evaluate that, right? Like at that time, right? That was like their best guess at the time. Just like for example, that science right now, as we know it, could be wrong. We just have no way to evaluate it because those are the scientific paradigms of the time, right? The science has changed over time.
Well, I mean, okay, so when we say the scientific method is a superior method to almost any other method right now, not almost, it is the better method. Yeah, science is flawed. Science makes mistakes. Scientific method sometimes gives us wrong answer, but it's the best method that we have come up with by far. And to say, well, at some, the scientific method has become more powerful compared to before, and before we didn't have it as a tool, and we had we didn't have it as refined as it is as a tool right now. So that because we didn't have it, we had more wrong answers than right answers.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, I mean, we're not passing judgment on people for coming up with wrong answers because it didn't have the scientific method. Like, obviously, like, yeah, I mean, that's to be expected.
Okay.
But the fact that the fact that they came up with so many wrong answers without the scientific method is actually makes our point of how important it is to have the scientific method.
I guess my question would be like, how do you, I guess, evaluate what a correct and wrong answer is? Like, especially like pre-science, like pre-science. I mean, I would even say right now, like like science can give us a good bet, but it cannot ultimately say if something is right or wrong. Right? It can just say this is like what we think is the best,
and it doesn't pretend to.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I agree. I'm just saying, like, I guess in the past, like when science was much worse or whatever, like, fuck, like, could you then say, I guess, could you rate the religions against each other by like how
well, I mean,
how much it improved people's lives, for example, like from a utilitarian perspective, you could say like one religion was better than the other because it provided better outcomes.
I mean, bad information or wrong ideas, it's a matter of how less they hurt people rather than how they help people, right?
Sure, but like,
you make,
yeah. But like you can rate them, but like which ideas hurt the lessest, right? And that would be better, because they would be better.
Yeah, I mean, from as a pragmatically, I think like I'm more interested in to just go after ideas because they're false rather than rank them, right? I'm just like, this is wrong. We're gonna call it out as bullshit because it's just wrong, right? I think pragmatically we don't wait for ideas to become harmful before we fight them. But also when it comes to the relationship between science and religion, we have unless you go back to cavemen, religion was always around when science was also around, right? Maybe not as effective as we have it today, but science has been with us for a very long time, right? And the interesting thing about religions is that what they've done is not just a fight against science, but also using science as a way to, how when we talk about the alt-right people, is that they try to use some truths that you don't know about as a way to convince you that they know some other things that other people are not telling you about, and then there's a whole bunch of bullshit that they feed you because they convince you that they hold these truths that nobody else is telling you by feeding you that truth that you could easily see that is right, and nobody else knows it. So these other bullshit that they're telling you must also be right. This is exactly what religions do, right? So for example, when it comes to science, you can see that with, like, for example, with medicine, or with stars, looking at the sky and observing how the stars move and coming up with predictive models to say, like, well, 10 years from now, the sun is going to go dark, or this is going to happen to this planet, or not just stars but also planets and stuff like that. And if you keep observing it, the fact that a lot of these religious people came up with models to show how the stars work and telling people, like, oh, this is going to happen, and then people saying, like, oh my god, it did happen. These people must be connected to the gods somehow. How would they know this, right? And then also using that as a way to feed you a whole bunch of bullshit. So we have to just be careful, because the history of Christianity and Islam does involve religious institutions funding science, but also using it as an excuse to show people that their religion, not just their science, has tapped into something about the universe that you must not know, that the average people don't know. And that's also a signal for why they are connected to a higher level of authority than the average person.
Sure. I guess I get that. I guess maybe I have a, cause like it's getting late for me, so I'm looking to wrap it up. I have sort of like a final question for you.
Okay.
How do you think you can sort of improve your messaging in terms of like reaching more people? And like, are there like certain people that you're trying to reach more than like other kinds of people? Are there people who you think are like specifically susceptible to like your way of talking and thinking? And like, how do you, I guess, how do you
Right.
plan on reaching those people?
Well, I mean, I think right now, I mean, the main thing that I think frustrates me is the level of discomfort people have about being shown that they're wrong. Okay, and just normalizing the idea that, like, oh, oh yeah, I was wrong. That was my idea yesterday, and poop, I was wrong. This is my new idea now. It just seems like for a lot of people that is such a personal attack to who they are and what they say. It just seems like a part of them is being lost if they have to admit that they were wrong about something. And it seems like ideas are not people are not arguing certain points because they are interested in what is true and what is not true. It seems like not just like in religious people, but also atheists when it comes to political ideas. It just seems like these are my ideas because this is my tribe and this is what my tribe says, and I'm saying these things to signal to my tribe that I belong to the tribe. And this is what people who are the enemies of my tribe usually say. So if you say these things or sound like you're saying these things, then you are the out group, and I have to be as strongly against you to signal to my tribe that I'm a hero, not just belong to the tribe, but I'm also a hero of the tribe. So it's really hard to convince people what is right and what is wrong if they're not even interested in what is right and what is wrong, if they're just looking for the narratives to defend just so that they have the sense of belonging. Now, how could we address that? Like, it's if the point is not even to figure out what is true, then we trying to come up with ways to convince people what is true or what is wrong. It's not even addressing the problem that we're having, right? The sense of belonging and also being celebrated by your tribe is the need that people are responding to, not knowing the truth. So figuring that out and how to effectively respond to that, like, what do we do then? Do we actually address the fact that most people do need a tribe and want a tribe? Like, can we just expect people like, oh no, don't be tribal? Well, it seems like to be hardwired in our brains. You can't just ask people to get rid of that. So coming up with an answer to that and effectively address that seems to be
Yeah, because
the main.
this was an interesting part of like your discussion with Destiny, right? And like you sort of talked about, sort of your approach is sort of just opening up ideas for people who come to you and like want to listen, right? And I think that's like a very noble approach. But ultimately, I think some of the people who are worst off because of like religion will never be exposed to sort of your way of approaching, right? People who are the most oppressed, people who don't have access to like internet and like television or whatever because they live in like societies that forbid those things or like restrict those things to some extent to like certain kinds of people. Like how, I guess, and like ultimately you could argue, oh well, I mean, I would argue as well that like those people that you're able to reach are people who are already questioning, right? They come to you questioning, looking for like some kind of answer, and you sort of provide like a different type of answer. And while I think that's great, um I'm just like here thinking, fuck, how can I ever convince my parents, for example, or like how can I
Right.
ever convince I don't know.
Well, I mean, a lot of the people that come to us, they come to us because they're offended, and we end up changing a lot of their opinions as
Hmm.
well. So it's not just people who are curious. There are also people that are coming on to just crush us. And we, in the past 15 years, we have experienced a lot of them changing their opinions in their, you know, arguing themselves out of their position rather than arguing us out of their position, which is not always a good thing, because I always worry if I don't change my mind fundamentally about something important for a very long time. I feel like, oh my God, have I become dogmatic? Like, why haven't I changed? Like, I can't be right about so many things. Like, how arrogant could I be to not change my opinions? But I do think we are reaching a lot of people in our podcast, where we can see that it's being listened to in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, in Iran. I made my book. Oh, by the way, here's my book. I translate, somebody translated this to Why There Is No God. It's been translated to Arabic and Persian and made available for free in those languages. And
that's a nice cover. It's actually it's really pleasing. It's like it's cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, and a lot of people who I'm just one person, and it seems like I get a lot of signals that I've managed to change a lot of people's opinions.
Yeah.
And to me, but overall, the whole atheist activist community seems to have been having a major impact on countries. Like, I mean, I heard like Saudi Arabia seems to have 5% atheists. I mean, and growing. That's incredible. I mean, that you can't get more closeted than Saudi Arabia, right? So 5% atheists. These are atheists that are not allowed to consume atheist content and not allowed to say to other people that they're atheists. That is huge progress for me. 5% in Saudi Arabia. Like, how do we even manage that? I was shocked.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but I'm like, fuck. Like, how do you increase that number in Saudi Arabia? Like do you have to actually go there on the ground and talk to
I mean, people in Saudi Arabia have internet, right?
Yeah, but do they watch like these kinds of content? I don't know.
They are, like, for example,
really,
the atheist Arab YouTube community is growing so fast. They are becoming online celebrities. The Urdu ones are just starting. I myself make Persian. I have a show, Atheist Republic, in Persian called Jomhuriye Bi Khodayan. And we just recently, like, we just started like only a year ago, and now we're seeing a lot of momentum in that. Especially not, unfortunately, YouTube is blocked in Iran, so it's hard to watch it in with using filters and stuff. But our our videos are getting copied and spread everywhere on Telegram and all these other social media outlets. And we just got started. And the fact that, like, for example, second generation Muslims in United States, recent reports show 25% of them leave Islam. So that shows like 25%. That's what you get when they're exposed to other ideas. So if we could imagine the progress we could make once we break down the walls that they built for us not to be able to access these people, like, imagine what they're afraid. They are like, a lot of the people that use, a lot of them, I follow a lot of Islamic content. In the past few years, they have gone from anti-Jewish and anti-Christian to making anti-atheist content. To me, that's a sign of progress. Why are they making more anti-atheist progress? We must be a threat to them right now, like, or else they wouldn't be having their guards up, right? And we're doing that with no resources. They have oil money behind them. They have like countries, government budgets behind their promotion of idea, and we have like our Patreon accounts and like nothing. And we're a threat to them now. I mean, I can't imagine how much progress we're going to make in the next decade or so.
Yeah, I guess I agree with that. I like, ultimately, I think, especially for like countries like the United States, for example, I think like just putting out ideas where you can, I think ultimately is a big reason why so many people are converting away from Islam. I think you said like 25%. That's pretty huge.
Yeah.
But I'm just like thinking, fuck, like if you're, because I think there's like an intersectionality between, like, if you're like really poor but also religious, you have a much lower chance of converting out because you don't have much time to like consume that content or like think about these things.
But it's about, I say, like, compounding interest, right? Like, if you look at the good ideas that survived in history, never happened overnight. It was a slow progress, and if we look, if you're climbing a mountain, you don't, a good idea is just to like look at the next step and the next step. If the entire time you keep looking at the highest peak of the mountain, you're gonna exhaust yourself, and you're gonna demotivate yourself, and you're gonna feel like it's all for nothing. Just don't look at the highest peak and you're like, oh my god, that's so far. Just look at the next hill, like that's the next objective, right? And celebrate the fact that the progresses that you're making along the way. And so it's not a binary thing. It's not like, oh my god, look how far we are. Well, no idea has won, like that. Like people who were fighting slavery, at some point it seemed like it's impossible, for like the world is not going to be able to function without slavery. How could we even fight that? But look at the progress. Look at gay rights, look at women rights, look at trans rights, right? None of these ideas, just none of these victories happened overnight. So I mean,
sure,
yeah, relatively, we're making a lot of, like, historically the ideas are changing faster than ever. So
well, yeah,
I'm
we
hopeful.
have unprecedented access to like internet and like streaming of like different, like hearing about stuff from like different tribes than your own is like an all-time high, right? So I think
Right.
that has a lot of things to do with that.
By the way, can I plug my YouTube channel?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, check out
Yeah.
Atheist
People
Republic.
are asking where to find you.
Oh yeah, YouTube channel. Check us, Atheist Republic. Yeah, and please subscribe. The YouTube algorithm really is hurting us. I mean, on Facebook, Atheist Republic is more than 2 million, but our YouTube channel doesn't really seem to want to grow. So if you guys
Wait, do
can
you
help.
shill?
But
I'm curious. Do you shill your YouTube on your other platforms?
yeah, it doesn't work though.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
We say naughty words, and we use like we talk about controversial topics, so we don't show up and recommend it or people's feed as often as other channels.
Everybody's asking for a link in chat. Fucking hell. Okay, wait.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Atheist
That's sweet.
Republic.
Can I put a copy of this on my own channel as well? I'll link to yours. Yeah, give me the link so I could, if I upload this on Atheist Republic.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you on Discord when we're done.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Oh, also thanks to Vikram. Vikram, thank you for setting this up. I want to thank Vikram, so he's motivated to find more great discussions from. He set up this conversation, so I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, I think ultimately we talked about a bit of like different issues as well. I think it's always interesting to hear like different people's like ethical systems and like how they sort of why they think, what they think, and you're definitely interesting to talk to, and I hope we can talk again sometime.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. Have a good day.
You too.
See you around.
Amazing. All right, see you.
Bye.
Bye.